Who does he think he is? The question burned through Leo Barisi's mind as he sat rigid at his private table, knuckles white around the whiskey glass in his tattooed hand. Around him, the upscale restaurant hummed with quiet elegance, crystal chandeliers casting warm golden light across white tablecloths, soft music drifting through conversations, the kind of place where powerful men conducted business over expensive bottles and unspoken threats. He wasn't here for pleasure. Enrico Beneventi, his underboss, insisted they meet a potential business partner before the weekend. Leo hated last-minute meetings, but he agreed. What he didn't expect was to have his entire world ripped apart in the space of a heartbeat. The restaurant doors opened and she walked in. Andrea Gracia, his maid, his live-in housekeeper who was supposed to be at the estate, who he'd last seen that morning in her simple black uniform, hair pulled back, quietly preparing his breakfast. But this wasn't that Andrea. This Andrea wore a stunning emerald green evening gown that hugged her curves before flowing gracefully to her ankles, the off-shoulder design showcasing collarbones he'd never noticed, her dark hair swept up in an elegant updo that exposed the graceful curve of her neck. She looked breathtaking. She looked expensive. She looked like she belonged in his world, but not with him. Then Robert Bush appeared beside her, the accountant's assistant from his financial firm, a man Leo barely registered during quarterly reviews. Robert smiled warmly, extended his hand, and led Andrea toward the dance floor as if he had every right to touch her. They began to dance, Robert's hand settling possessively on the small of her back. The whiskey glass cracked in Leo's grip. Blood mixed with expensive liquor, dripping onto the white tablecloth, but he didn't feel the pain. The intricate tattoos on his neck seemed to pulse with each violent heartbeat as something dark, primal, and possessive erupted inside him, something he'd spent years keeping carefully buried. The Mafia boss had just seen his maid with another man, and he was about to explode with jealous rage. "Welcome back, my beautiful family. I've truly missed all of you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for sticking with me. Your love and support mean everything." If you're excited for today's story and ready to soak it all in, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. Tomorrow, I've got another captivating story lined up for you, and believe me, you won't want to miss it. Leo told himself to look away, to turn back to his business partner, to focus on the deal that had brought him here, to pretend the woman in his arms wasn't his maid. That was the rational move, the controlled move. But he'd lost control the moment they started dancing. Robert held Andrea with easy confidence, spinning her gently as the music swelled. She followed his lead gracefully, the emerald fabric of her dress flowing with each movement. They talked quietly, and whatever Robert said made Andrea smile, that genuine, unguarded smile Leo had only glimpsed in stolen moments at the estate. Minutes passed like hours. Leo's business partner had long since given up trying to engage him and left the table entirely. Enrico hovered nearby, sensing danger, but uncertain how to intervene. Finally, mercifully, the song ended. Leo stood before he consciously decided to move. His feet carried him across the restaurant floor with predatory purpose. The dark fitted shirt he wore did nothing to hide the dangerous energy radiating from him. If anything, the visible tattoos on his neck and the casual power in his stride made him more threatening. Conversations died in his wake. People recognized danger when it walked past their tables. Andrea was heading toward the restroom hallway, alone, when Leo blocked her path. She looked up, and the lightness drained from her expression. "Mr. Barisi," she breathed, taking an instinctive step back. "What are you doing here?" His voice was quiet, controlled, but fury simmered beneath every word. Andrea's shock transformed into defiance, her spine straightening. "It's my day off." "That's not what I asked." "It's none of your business," she said, lifting her chin despite the tremor in her voice. "I'm not working. I'm not on your property. I'm not dressed like that," Leo interrupted, his eyes raking over her. "Not with him. Not without telling me." The possessiveness in his tone shocked them both. Andrea's eyes widened and color flooded her cheeks, not embarrassment, but anger. "I don't need your permission to." "Andrea?" Robert appeared, concern creasing his features. Is everything okay? Leo's head turned slowly, and whatever Robert saw in those dark eyes, in the face of a man whose tattoos marked him as someone from a world Robert couldn't comprehend, made him step backward involuntarily. The space between them crackled with barely restrained violence. "We're having a private conversation," Leo said, each word precise as a blade. "I just wanted to make sure Robert started. "Leave." The single word carried absolute authority. Not a suggestion, a command. Robert looked to Andrea for guidance, but she stood frozen, humiliation burning through her as nearby diners watched the scene unfold with poorly concealed interest. After another moment's hesitation, Robert retreated to their table, his face pale. "You had no right," Andrea whispered, tears of fury gathering. "I have every right," Leo countered, though his voice wavered with uncertainty. Andrea pushed past him, grabbed her purse from Robert's table, and headed for the exit without looking back. She moved quickly, almost running, like she was escaping something dangerous. She was. Leo remained motionless, watching her disappear through the restaurant doors. The other diners slowly returned to their meals, though whispers followed him as he walked back to his table, his tattooed hands clenched at his sides. Enrico appeared immediately, tablet in hand, reading the situation with practiced efficiency. "Boss, find out everything about Robert Bush," Leo said quietly, lowering himself into his chair. His hand throbbed where the glass had cut deep earlier. "Everything. Where he works, where he lives, who he knows. I want it by morning." "Already on it," Enrico replied carefully. "Do you need?" "Just do it." Enrico disappeared. Leo sat alone at his table, the restaurant's ambient noise washing over him like static. He stared at his bloodied hand, at the tattoos decorating his knuckles now stained with crimson, at the physical evidence of his loss of control. He'd crossed a line tonight, revealed something he should have kept buried, claimed ownership he had no right to claim. Andrea knew now. She'd seen the possessiveness, the jealousy, the barely controlled violence lurking beneath his carefully maintained authority. And there was no going back from this. Everything had changed. Andrea didn't sleep. She'd returned to her small room in the staff quarters of the Barisi estate around midnight, still wearing the borrowed emerald dress, mascara smudged from tears of humiliation. The memory of Leo's eyes, dark, possessive, burning, haunted her through the sleepless hours until dawn broke gray and cold through her single window. She considered not showing up for work, considered packing her few belongings and disappearing before Leo woke. But she had nowhere to go, no savings substantial enough to cover first and last month's rent anywhere in the city, and a family in Guadalajara depending on her weekly wire transfers. So at 7 a.m., Andrea put on her black uniform with a white apron, pulled her hair back into its usual tight bun, and descended to the main house on shaking legs. The kitchen was empty. Lucia wouldn't arrive until 8. Andrea started the coffee, going through the familiar motions like armor, pretending last night never happened, pretending she hadn't seen something dangerous and hungry in her employer's eyes. She was measuring espresso grounds when the intercom crackled to life. "Andrea, my study. Now." Leo's voice was flat, controlled, which somehow made it worse. She'd heard him angry before, shouting at associates, slamming doors, but this cold tone meant something different. Her hands trembled as she climbed the stairs to the second floor, past the expensive artwork she dusted weekly, past the windows overlooking the manicured gardens she wasn't allowed to walk through on her breaks. At Leo's study door, she pulled the folded letter from her apron pocket and knocked twice. "Come in." Leo sat behind his massive mahogany desk, paperwork spread before him, wearing a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. The tattoos on his forearms seemed to writhe in the morning light streaming through the windows. He didn't look up. Andrea stepped inside, willing her voice steady. "Mr. Barisi, I need to." "Coffee's late," he interrupted, still not looking at her. "I'm sorry. I'll bring it immediately, but first," she placed the letter on the edge of his desk. "I can't work here anymore." The silence stretched. Leo's eyes finally lifted from the papers to the letter, then slowly, deliberately, to her face. His expression was unreadable. "No," he said simply. Andrea blinked. "I'm giving you proper notice. 2 weeks, as stated in my... And I'm not accepting it." Leo leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. "You have a contract, Andrea. 3 months minimum notice. I can hold you to that." Her shock morphed into anger, hot and righteous. "You can't force me to stay." "Can't I?" His tone was conversational, almost curious. "Where will you go? What will you do? Who will hire you without a reference from your previous employer?" The casual cruelty of it, the reminder of exactly how powerless she was, made her chest tight. "This is illegal." "Then call the authorities." Leo stood, moving around the desk with predatory grace. "Tell them you're here on a work visa I sponsored. Tell them about the cash payments you send home that I've been kind enough not to document officially. Tell them everything, Andrea. Let's see who they believe." She backed up instinctively until her shoulders hit the bookshelf. Leo kept coming, stopping close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, close enough to see the faint stubble on his jaw, the pulse hammering in his tattooed neck. "Why Robert Bush?" Leo asked quietly, and his voice was different now. Rough, almost wounded. "What?" Andrea breathed. "Why him?" Leo's hands gripped the bookshelf on either side of her head, caging her without touching. "Why did you let him touch you?" "That's none of your concern." "Everything in this house is my concern," Leo growled. Then, quieter, the vulnerability shocking them both. "I don't like seeing you with other men." Understanding crashed over Andrea like cold water. The surveillance. The rage. The possessiveness. He wanted. She couldn't let herself finish that thought. She ducked under his arm and fled, her footsteps echoing in the hallway. Behind her, the sound of Leo's fist slamming into solid wood cracked through the silence, followed by the splinter of breaking oak. And then, barely audible, a word that sounded almost like a prayer. "Fuck." Leo sat in the darkness of his private office, the glow from multiple monitors washing his face in pale blue light. On the screens, Andrea moved through the estate, crossing the kitchen, climbing the back stairs to her quarters, pausing at the window with her phone. He told himself the cameras were for security, for protecting the property, the staff, the business conducted within these walls. He'd stopped pretending 3 days ago. Now, he watched her the way other men watch television. Obsessively. Compulsively. Searching for something in the tilt of her head, the slope of her shoulders, the way she moved when she thought no one was looking. The door opened without warning. Enrico Beneventi entered carrying a manila folder, his eyes immediately catching the surveillance feeds. He stopped mid-step. "Boss, this is..." Leo's head turned slowly, his expression daring Enrico to finish that sentence. "What?" Enrico cleared his throat and approached the desk carefully, like someone approaching a wounded animal. "Robert Bush. You wanted everything." He placed the folder down. 32 years old, clean record, works in accounting at Morrison Financial, actually handles some of our legitimate accounts. Volunteers at a community center on weekends teaching financial literacy to immigrants. No criminal history, no debts, no connections to any families. "Too clean," Leo muttered, flipping through the pages without really reading them. "He's exactly what he appears to be," Enrico said. "A good guy. The kind of man who he caught himself." "Say it." Leo's voice was quiet, dangerous. "The kind of man someone like Andrea deserves," Enrico finished carefully. "Someone without blood on his hands." Leo's jaw clenched, but he didn't respond. Because Enrico was right, and they both knew it. Across the estate, in the modest kitchen where staff took their breaks, Andrea sat across from Lucia Udinisi, the estate manager who'd worked for the Barisi family for 15 years. Lucia had seen things, knew things, and right now, her weathered face was creased with concern. "He wouldn't let me quit," Andrea whispered, hands wrapped around a mug of tea she hadn't touched. "He threatened me. My visa, my references, everything." Lucia reached across the table and gripped Andrea's hand. Listen to me carefully, Mija. Men like Leo Barisi don't pursue the help unless they're used to taking what they want. And when powerful men want something from powerless women, they take it. I can handle myself, Andrea insisted, but her voice wavered. Can you? Lucia's eyes were hard with truth. You can't quit. You can't refuse him. You live under his roof, eat his food, depend on his money for your family's survival. What exactly do you think you can do if he decides he wants more than just to watch you? The words settled over Andrea like ice water. She'd been telling herself she had choices, that she could set boundaries, that the law would protect her. But Lucia was right. What power did she actually have against a man like Leo Barisi? So, what do I do? Andrea asked, hating how small her voice sounded. You survive, Lucia said simply. You keep your head down, do your job, and pray his interest moves elsewhere.
She paused.
And you stop seeing that accountant before Leo does something you'll both regret. That evening, alone in her small room, Andrea's phone lit up with a message. Robert *K, just wanted to check if you're okay. That guy last night seemed intense. Robert *I know this is forward, but would you like to have dinner next week? Somewhere quieter. Just us. Andrea stared at the screen, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. Every rational part of her brain screamed to decline, to protect Robert, to avoid escalating the situation with Leo. But another part, the part that refused to be owned, that remembered her grandmother's fierce independence, that was tired of making herself small for dangerous men, refused to back down. She typed quickly before she could change her mind. Yes, I'd like that. The message sent. In his office 2 floors above, Leo's phone chimed with an alert. He'd installed tracking software on Andrea's device weeks ago, just to keep her safe, he'd told himself. He read the message exchange once.
Twice.
3 times. Then he threw his phone across the room, watching it shatter against the wall. Enrico, he said into the intercom, his voice deadly calm. Find out where Robert Bush likes to eat. Andrea chose a small Italian restaurant on the opposite side of the city, far from Leo's usual territories. It was cozy and unassuming, with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles, the kind of place where normal people had normal dates. The kind of place where a mafia boss would never think to look. Robert was already waiting when she arrived, standing to pull out her chair with a genuine smile that made her chest ache. When was the last time someone had treated her like this? Like she mattered beyond the coffee she poured or the floor she mopped. You look beautiful, Robert said, and it sounded like truth, not transaction. They ordered pasta and wine. Robert asked about her family, leaning forward with real interest as she described her mother's garden in Guadalajara, her younger brother's dreams of becoming a teacher. When he asked about her own dreams, Andrea hesitated before admitting the truth. I want to open a bakery someday, she said quietly, as if saying it too loud might jinx it. Something small. Just me and the smell of fresh bread and people who come in and feel safe. That's beautiful, Robert said, and she could tell he meant it. What's your specialty? Conscious. Andrea smiled, relaxing for the first time in weeks. My grandmother taught me. She said the secret is. She stopped mid-sentence. Leo stood near the restaurant entrance, perfectly still, eyes locked on their table with an expression that made her blood turn to ice. He wore all black, tattoos visible above his collar, and even from across the room, she could feel the fury radiating from him like heat from asphalt in summer. The nearby tables fell silent. People sensed it instinctively, the presence of violence, of danger, of something predatory moving through their midst. Leo approached with deliberate, measured steps. Each footfall seemed to echo despite the carpet. Robert followed Andrea's gaze and paled. Andrea. Leo's voice was perfectly controlled, which somehow made it infinitely worse. We're leaving.
Now.
I'm having dinner, Andrea replied, trying to keep her voice steady even as her hand shook. With me, Robert added, attempting bravery that his trembling voice betrayed. Leo's eyes cut to Robert, and the younger man actually flinched. The look lasted only a second, but it promised violence, pain, consequences beyond imagination. This is your only warning, Leo said, each word precise as a blade. Stay away from what's mine. She's not yours, Robert managed, though his voice cracked on the words. Leo's smile was terrifying. All teeth, no warmth, the smile of a predator showing fangs. She works in my house. Sleeps under my roof. Every morning I know exactly where she is. Every night I control whether she eats, whether she's warm, whether she's safe. He leaned down, hands on their table, close enough that Andrea could smell his cologne. Tell me again, what part of her isn't mine? The humiliation crashed over Andrea like a wave. Tears burned her eyes as she realized everyone in the restaurant was watching, listening, seeing her reduced to property, to a possession being claimed by its owner. Don't speak about me like I'm property. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. She grabbed her purse with shaking hands, refused to look at Robert's shocked face, and stormed toward the exit. Leo followed immediately, his footsteps heavy behind her. Andrea, wait. Robert called out weakly, but made no move to follow. He remained frozen at the table, face pale, hands trembling around his wine glass. The cold night air hit Andrea's face as she burst through the restaurant doors into the parking lot. She heard Leo exit behind her, the door closing with a soft click that sounded like a prison cell locking. She whirled to face him, tears streaming freely now, fury and fear and helplessness warring in her chest. What gives you the right? She demanded, her voice breaking. Leo stood there in the parking lot lights, and for just a moment, something besides rage flickered across his face. Something that looked almost like pain. In the parking lot, Andrea whirled to face Leo, fury finally overcoming the fear that had kept her compliant for so long. What gives you the right? Everything. Leo snarled, stepping toward her. You think you can just leave the estate, meet strange men without protection, without telling me? He's not strange. Andrea's voice rose to match his, echoing off the parked cars. He's a kind, normal man who asked me to dinner like a normal person. And I don't need your permission to have a life. You need my permission for everything. Leo's hands clenched into fists at his sides. You work for me. You live in my house. I'm not your property, Andrea screamed, and several people entering the restaurant turned to stare. She didn't care anymore. Let them look. Let them see. I'm a human being with rights, with choices. Choices. Leo laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and ugly. What choices do you have without me? Where would you go? Who would hire you? Someone. Anyone. Anywhere that isn't here, controlled by you, watched by you. I watch you because Leo stepped closer, his hand reaching out instinctively. Andrea flinched violently, stumbling backward, her arms coming up to protect her face. The movement froze Leo mid-motion. His hand hung suspended in the air between them, suddenly looking less like a gesture and more like a threat. Time seemed to stop. The parking lot sounds, distant traffic, restaurant music, voices, all faded into nothing. For the first time, real fear flashed across Andrea's face. Not the cautious wariness she'd shown before, but genuine terror. Fear of him, of what he might do, of the man standing in front of her with violence written in every line of his body. Leo's anger collapsed like a building imploding. He saw himself through her eyes, a dangerous man, a monster, someone to be afraid of. His hand dropped to his side. I would never, he started, voice hoarse. Andrea, I would never. But the words died. Because what could he say? That he would never hurt her? He'd been hurting her for weeks. That he would never force her? He'd already used every form of power he had to trap her. You scare me, Andrea whispered, her voice breaking on the words. Tears streamed down her face, catching the parking lot lights. When you look at me like that, like you want to. Wanna what? Leo demanded, but his voice was softer now, almost desperate. Hurt you?
No. God, no.
I would never hurt you. Then what? Andrea asked, tears spilling faster. What do you want from me, Leo? Why can't you just let me go? The use of his first name, she'd never called him that before, broke something in him. Leo swallowed hard. The confession dragged from somewhere deep and dark, a place he'd kept locked for years. "I want to keep you," he said, voice raw. "I want every morning to start with seeing you. I want to know you're safe, that you're protected, that you're mine." "I'm not yours," Andrea cried, backing toward the street. "I'm not a thing you can keep. I'm not a possession or a pet or—" A car pulled into the parking lot, its headlights washing over them in harsh white light, breaking the intensity of the moment. Andrea used the interruption to wipe her tears roughly with the back of her hand. "I'm going home," she said, voice shaking but determined.
Alone.
"And if you follow me, if you track me, if you send your men to watch me, I'm calling the police.
Contract or no contract.
Visa or no visa. I'll risk everything before I let you control me anymore." She walked away, shoulders shaking with silent sobs, heading toward the street to hail a cab. Leo stood alone in the empty parking lot, the night air cold on his skin, his reflection visible in a car window, tattooed, dangerous, controlling. Exactly like his father. The thought made him sick. Carola Lorenzo didn't call ahead. She never did when she suspected her brother was doing something stupid, and the silence from the estate over the past week confirmed her worst fears. She arrived mid-morning, her sleek black car pulling up to the main entrance as Lucia emerged to greet her with worried eyes. "Where is she?" Carola asked without preamble. Lucia's expression said everything. "Kitchen. Miss Lorenzo, it's bad." Carola found Andrea at the industrial sink, scrubbing dishes with mechanical precision, her eyes swollen and red-rimmed. The girl didn't even look up when Carola entered, just kept washing the same plate over and over. "How long has he been like this?" Carola asked gently. Andrea's hand stilled. "I don't know what you mean, Miss Lorenzo." "Don't." Carola's voice was kind but firm. "Lucia told me enough. How long has my brother been watching you?" The kindness broke something in Andrea. Her shoulders shook.
Weeks.
Maybe longer. "I don't know. I can't quit. I can't leave. I can't," her voice cracked. Carola placed a hand on Andrea's shoulder, then turned and stormed toward Leo's study, her heels clicking sharply against marble. She didn't knock. The door slammed open, and Leo looked up from his desk, his face haggard, dark circles under his eyes. "You're doing it again," Carola said coldly. "Doing what?" Leo asked, his voice flat. "Taking what you want without thinking about the damage. Just like Papa." That got Leo's attention. He stood slowly, his expression dangerous. "I'm nothing like him." "Really?" Carola laughed bitterly. "Because from where I'm standing, you're treating that woman exactly like Papa treated the women who worked for him, like possessions, like toys. And you know where that ended." Leo's face darkened at the reference. Their father's violence, his exploitation of vulnerable household staff, the scandals and payoffs, and one woman who'd tried to kill herself, it had nearly destroyed the family. Leo had been 16, old enough to understand, old enough to hate what he saw. "It's not like that," Leo said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I care about her." "Then let her go," Carola said simply. She walked closer, her voice softening. "Leo, if you actually care about Andrea, give her enough money to start over somewhere else and let her leave. Because, right now, she's trapped. And a trapped person can't choose you. She can only survive you." The words landed like physical blows. Leo sank back into his chair, suddenly looking older, tired. "I don't know how," he admitted quietly. Across the city, in a small bakery where Andrea had once mentioned wanting to work, Deborah Harris pulled off her apron and approached the nervous young woman who'd just come in asking about part-time positions. "You're Andrea, right? Robert's friend." Andrea nodded cautiously. Deborah's expression was sympathetic but honest. "Look, I like Robert. He's a good guy. But he told people he can't see you anymore, that your boss is dangerous and possessive, and it's not worth the trouble." She paused. "I'm sorry. You seem nice. But people are scared of Leo Barisi." Andrea left the bakery feeling both relieved and utterly humiliated. Even her potential escape routes were closing. That night, she was cleaning up after dinner when she felt his presence. Leo stood in the kitchen doorway, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Minutes passed in suffocating silence. "If you're going to fire me, just do it," Andrea finally said, not turning around. "I don't want to fire you," Leo replied quietly. "I want to understand why you went out with someone you don't even like, just to get away from me." Her hands stilled on the dish she was washing. "How did you?" "I know everything about you, Andrea." Leo stepped closer. "I know you send half your paycheck to your mother in Guadalajara. I know you wake up at 5 a.m., even though you don't start until 7. I know you read romance novels in Spanish. I know your coffee order, your favorite color, that you sing when you think no one's listening." Andrea turned slowly, disturbed by the litany of intimate details. "That's not caring, Leo. That's surveillance." "I know," Leo admitted, and for the first time, he looked almost ashamed. "I know, and I don't know how to stop." Doroteo Davide had been with the Barisi family for 30 years. He'd served Leo's father, helped Leo rise to power, and believed in the old ways: hierarchy, tradition, respect. Which was why he sat at the head of the conference table now, fingers steepled, looking at Leo with disappointment usually reserved for unruly children. Enrico sat to his right, looking uncomfortable. Carola to his left, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Leo stood by the window, back to them all, tension radiating from his shoulders. "We need to discuss your distraction," Doroteo began. Leo's shoulders stiffened, but he didn't turn around. "Your obsession with the maid is making you look weak to our associates and rivals," Doroteo continued, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "You've been unfocused, volatile, making decisions based on emotion rather than strategy. Last week you walked out of a meeting with the Colombians. The week before, you nearly killed a man for making a joke about." "Doroteo, this isn't." Enrico tried to interrupt. "It needs to be said." Doroteo cut him off sharply. He leaned forward. "Leo, you have two acceptable options. Send her away with generous severance and regain your focus. Or, if you must have her, keep her discreetly as a mistress. But this public fixation, this..." He gestured dismissively. "This treatment of her like she matters beyond her station. It's beneath your position and dangerous for the family." The silence that followed was suffocating. Leo turned slowly from the window. His expression was perfectly calm, which Enrico recognized as the most dangerous sign of all. "Say that again," Leo said quietly, walking toward the table with deliberate, measured steps. Doroteo, confident in his position as Leo's elder and advisor, stood his ground. "She's just a servant, Leo. There are 1,000 more like her. This isn't about the girl, it's about you losing control over." Leo moved faster than anyone expected. His hand shot out, grabbing Doroteo by the throat and slamming him against the wall hard enough to crack the plaster. Picture frames rattled. Carola gasped. Enrico half stood, then froze. "She has a name," Leo snarled, his face inches from Doroteo's purpling features. "Andrea. Her name is Andrea Gracia. And you will never, never speak about her like she's disposable again. Do you understand me?" Doroteo clawed at Leo's hand, unable to speak, eyes bulging. "Do you understand?" Leo repeated, tightening his grip. Doroteo managed a strangled nod. Leo released him. Doroteo collapsed to the floor, coughing and gasping, one hand on his bruised throat. Without another word, without looking at Enrico or Carola, Leo stormed out of the conference room, the door slamming behind him with enough force to shake the walls. In the hallway, Andrea stood frozen with a dust cloth in her hands. She'd been cleaning the hallway sconces when the shouting started, had heard every word through the heavy door. Her heart pounded as she processed what she'd just heard. Leo defending her with violence, with fury, with complete disregard for his own interests. The conference room door opened. Doroteo stumbled out, still coughing, and stopped when he saw her standing there. His eyes narrowed, and he sneered despite his damaged throat. "You're going to ruin him, girl," he rasped. Andrea surprised herself with how calm her voice sounded.
"No."
"He's ruining himself. I'm just the excuse." She turned and walked away, but instead of heading to the kitchen or her quarters, she found herself climbing the stairs to the second floor. Her feet carried her to Leo's private study, his sanctuary, the one room she was never supposed to enter without explicit permission. She didn't knock. She pushed open the door and stepped inside, closing it behind her with a soft click. Leo stood at the window, his back to her, one hand braced against the frame, his shoulders heaving with each breath. "Get out," he said without turning around. "No," Andrea replied. Andrea closed the study door behind her with a soft click that sounded too loud in the heavy silence. Leo stood at the window, his back to her, shoulders rigid, hands clenched into fists at his sides. She could see his reflection in the glass, jaw tight, eyes closed, a man barely holding himself together. "Is that what I am to you?" Andrea asked, voice shaking but determined. "A situation? A distraction? Something to be handled?" Leo's shoulders tensed further. "You heard." "I heard you defend me," Andrea admitted, taking a step closer. "I also heard you can't deny what Doroteo said, that I'm making you weak, that I'm bad for your business, that this whole thing is wrong." "It is wrong," Leo said, finally turning to face her. His eyes were darker than she'd ever seen them, haunted. "Everything about this is wrong. The power I have over you. The fact that you can't leave even if you want to. The way I've been treating you like something I own." "Then why?" Andrea demanded, tears forming despite her determination not to cry. "Why are you doing this to me? To yourself?" "Because I don't know how else to be." Leo's voice broke, the confession raw and torn from somewhere deep. "I don't know how to want someone without trying to control them. I don't know how to love someone without destroying them. My father took what he wanted and called it power. I swore I'd never be him. But look," his voice cracked, "look at what I'm doing to you." Andrea's breath caught at the word love. Her hand flew to her chest. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't use that word when you don't know what it means." Leo crossed the room in 3 long strides, stopping just short of touching her. Close enough that she could see the pulse hammering in his tattooed neck, close enough to feel the heat radiating from him, but carefully, deliberately not touching. "I look at you every morning and forget how to breathe," he said, his voice low and intense. "I see you smile at Lucia or the gardeners, and I wish I knew how to make you smile like that around me. I watched you dance in that green dress, and I wanted to burn the whole restaurant down because you looked happy, and it wasn't because of me." His eyes were wet now, vulnerable. "If that's not love, then I don't know what is. But I know it's killing me." Tears streamed down Andrea's face. "You have all the power, Leo. How do I trust this is real? How do I know you won't just take what you want and throw me away when you're bored? Or worse, keep me trapped here forever, because you can?" "You don't," Leo admitted, and his own eyes were wet now too. "You don't know, because every reason you have to not trust me is valid. Every fear you have is justified." The brutal honesty broke something in both of them. Andrea turned toward the door, overwhelmed, needing escape, needing air, needing space to think. But before she reached it, Leo's voice stopped her, raw with desperation. "What if I gave you the power?" She paused, hand on the doorknob. "What? What if I gave you complete freedom?" Leo continued, the words tumbling out. "Void your contract. Give you enough money to start over anywhere you want. Let you walk away with no strings, no threats, no consequences. And then, only then, ask you to choose me anyway." Andrea turned back slowly, searching his face for the trap, for the angle, for the manipulation. "Why would you do that?" "Because Corolla is right." "Because you're right," Leo said. "You can't choose me when staying is your only option. So, I'm giving you a different option. Leave. Be free. And if you still want me after that." He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Andrea stared at him, this powerful, dangerous man offering to give up the only leverage that kept her near him. "You're serious." "I'm terrified," Leo admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But yes, I'm serious." Andrea took a shaky breath, her whole body trembling. "Then do it. Void my contract. Let me go." And then her voice broke. "Then maybe we'll see if any of this is real." For months felt like 4 years. Andrea moved into a small apartment across the city. One bedroom, modest kitchen, a window that caught morning light. Leo's lawyer had arranged it, paid for 1 year in advance, with paperwork Andrea personally verified showed no strings, no clauses, no hidden control. It was hers. Truly hers. She worked at the bakery Lucia's friend owned, arriving before dawn to learn the rhythm of kneading dough, the precise temperature for proofing, the satisfaction of pulling golden loaves from industrial ovens. Her hands, once soft from household work, developed calluses. Her savings account grew slowly, but steadily. She was building something. Leo threw himself into work with mechanical precision. Enrico watched his boss move through meetings, sign documents, make decisions, all the right actions with none of the fire that used to drive him. He was colder than ever, but hollow inside, a shell going through motions. They didn't speak, didn't text, didn't cross paths. Though Andrea sometimes noticed the dark sedan parked across from the bakery, the familiar figure of one of Leo's men keeping watch from a distance. Not controlling, just ensuring she was safe. She never acknowledged them, but she never called the police either. Then one evening, Lucia appeared at Andrea's door holding a small envelope. Leo is hosting a private dinner at La Rosa, the restaurant where everything started, Lucia said carefully. He asked me to invite you. Not as staff, as his guest. He said there's absolutely no obligation, but he hopes you'll come. Andrea stared at the envelope. Every rational part of her screamed to refuse. But her hands opened it anyway. She arrived at La Rosa, wearing a simple navy dress she'd bought with her own money, hair loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back. The entire restaurant was empty except for one table by the window, white tablecloth gleaming under soft lights. Leo stood when he saw her. He wore a dark suit, his tattoos visible at his collar, looking somehow both powerful and vulnerable, like a man waiting for a verdict he knew he didn't deserve to win. You came, he said softly, not assuming, not commanding, just hoping. They sat. The first minutes were awkward, whether the bakery, her apartment, safe topics that skirted the chasm between them. But slowly, carefully, they began to talk about what mattered. Leo told her about therapy, about confronting the patterns he'd learned from his father, about the daily work of separating love from possession. Andrea shared her fears, her anger at how he'd treated her, the confusion about her own feelings she still couldn't fully untangle. I was wrong, Leo said, meeting her eyes without flinching. About everything. I treated you like property when you were the freest person I'd ever met. I tried to cage you because I was terrified of how much power you had over me. And now? Andrea asked quietly. Now I'm learning that loving someone means wanting them to be free, even if that freedom means they choose someone else, Leo said, and his voice trembled slightly. But I'm hoping. He paused, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. I'm hoping you might choose me anyway. Not because I employ you. Not because I control anything. But because you want to. Andrea looked at this man who once terrified her and saw someone completely different. Someone who'd done the work. I'm not ready, she said honestly. I need more time. Take all the time you need, Leo agreed immediately. I'll wait. Years if that's what it takes. Over the following months, they built something new. Leo courted her properly, asking permission, respecting boundaries, supporting her dreams without controlling them. When Andrea's bakery opened 8 months later, Leo stood in the back, letting her shine. 1 year after that first jealous encounter, Leo invited her back to La Rosa, the entire restaurant, just for them. He took her hand gently. A year ago, I sat at this table and watched you dance with another man, and I thought I was losing my mind. I was so angry, so possessive, so sure you were mine to control. And now? Andrea asked. Leo pulled out a small velvet box, revealing a simple, elegant ring. Now I know it was fear. Fear I'd never be good enough. Fear you'd realize you deserve better. Fear I'd destroy the best thing that ever happened to me. Andrea's breath caught. This isn't pressure, Leo continued. It's a question. Andrea Gracia, will you marry me? Not because I employ you, I don't. Not because I have power over you. You're completely free. But because I love you, and I want to spend my life proving I can be worthy of you. Tears streamed down her face. You have conditions? She asked, testing him. You have conditions, Leo corrected gently. Tell me what you need. I keep my bakery separate, my business, my decisions. I maintain my independence. You continue therapy. And if you ever try to control me again, I walk and you let me go. Done. Leo agreed without hesitation. Anything else? Andrea looked at this man who'd spent a year dismantling his own ego to become someone different. Yes, she whispered. I'll marry you. Leo's eyes closed in relief. When they opened, they were wet. He slid the ring onto her finger with trembling hands, then stood and pulled her gently to her feet. The same song from that first night played softly. Dance with me? Leo asked, extending his hand, not demanding, just asking. Andrea took his hand. As they swayed together, Leo held her carefully, like she was precious rather than possessed. Thank you for seeing past the monster, he whispered. Andrea pulled back to meet his eyes. I never saw a monster. I saw a man who needed to learn how to love instead of own. And you did the work. You actually changed. As they danced where jealous rage once exploded, Leo understood. He hadn't lost control. He'd finally learned that some things are more powerful than control. Love isn't about possession. It's about choice. And Andrea chose him, freely, with full power to walk away. The transformation was complete. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and be part of a community that cherishes unforgettable tales like this one. Your support means more than you know. It fuels the creation of even more stories that speak to the heart. So, whether you're watching from your TV or your phone, take a moment to join us. Every like, every subscription, every share helps us continue bringing these stories to life. Thank you for being a part of this journey.